Hi, you're on the Reddit Confessions channel. The champagne glass was still in her hand when I left. She was mid-sentence, something about how I once confused almond milk with body wash. People around her burst into laughter, and she basked in it like applause. I didn't make a sound. I just stood, straightened my jacket, and walked out through the garden gate, past the flickering tiki torches and the sound of laughter that wasn't for me. Nobody noticed, not even her. I reached my car without anyone calling my name. I opened the door, sat down, stared at the steering wheel for a full minute. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just gripped the leather so hard I thought it might tear. Then I started driving. Not home, not to a friend's place. I didn't even check the map. I just drove. I remember her laugh echoing in my head, the way she tossed her hair back when she delivered her lines. That fake, polished humor she wore like perfume, meant to charm strangers and quietly destroy me. The joke she told was rehearsed. It always was. She'd used it at brunch once with her coworkers. He thought oat milk came from shaking oatmeal, she'd said. I married a walking dad joke. Except this time, it wasn't brunch. It was a party packed with people she respected, people whose opinions she craved, and she handed them my dignity like it was a party favor. When did I become her anecdote? That night marked something I hadn't seen coming. Not because the joke was cruel, but because of how casually she told it, like I was a character in a sitcom that didn't need my permission to air. And the worst part? I laughed with her the first few times. I enabled it. I normalized it. I let her turn me into this harmless, goofy, fumbling version of myself because I thought that's what love was, letting your partner shine, even if you dim a little in the process. But I wasn't dimming anymore. I was disappearing. That night I checked into a tiny roadside inn with flickering hallway lights and a front desk clerk who didn't even look up. I handed him my card, signed the receipt, and sat on the edge of a lumpy mattress wondering if anyone else had ever left a party and realized they might not come back. Not just to the party, but to the entire life waiting behind it. She still hadn't texted, not one call, not a single, "Where are you?" And that silence said more than any apology ever could. This isn't a revenge story. I'm not out for drama or payback. I'm just a man who left quietly and started asking himself, if no one notices when you're gone, were you ever really there at all? I didn't go back the next morning. I didn't even check my phone. It was still on silent in my glove compartment, buried beneath a stack of receipts and an old parking ticket I never paid. I sat at the tiny desk in the motel room, staring out the window at a half-empty parking lot and a gas station sign that blinked with one burnt-out letter, as if it too had given up explaining itself. I remembered the way her voice danced through the air when she told those jokes, how her eyes sparkled, not from joy but from approval. She lived for reactions. The louder the laugh, the deeper the dig. She didn't even need to look at me anymore. I was just the material, disposable, familiar. At some point, I stopped being a person in her stories and became the punchline she warmed up the room with. That realization didn't come all at once. It came in pieces, like the time her friend asked, "Wait, is that the guy who burned the garlic bread 3 times in 1 week?" And Haley giggled, "Yep, that's my chef." Or when I tripped over the dog bed and landed on my face during a dinner party, and she posted it online with the caption, "My husband, the graceful ninja." Hundreds of likes. Even her boss commented with a laughing emoji. I never minded being laughed at when it was between us. That kind of intimacy, the shared giggle under a blanket, or the snort over a burnt pancake, that used to mean something. But now the laughter didn't end in a kiss. It ended in her turning away, already plotting the next story to tell at my expense. I stayed away for 2 days. She didn't notice. Or she did, and chose not to care. On the 3rd day, I drove back, not to return, but to see. To look her in the eyes without saying a word, and see if there was anything left worth salvaging. I parked down the block and waited outside the house in my car. The lights were on in the kitchen. She was on a video call, laughing again. I watched her through the window. Same smile, same head tilt, same perfectly timed laugh. For a moment, I imagined walking in, sitting across from her and saying, "Hey, remember me?" But I didn't. Instead, I did something that even now feels surreal. I got out of the car, walked up to the porch, and quietly slid my wedding ring into the mailbox. No note, no drama, just that one symbol of everything I had given and everything she took for granted. I turned and walked away. 2 hours later, my phone buzzed for the first time. A single message from her. "Why is your ring in the mailbox?" I didn't respond, because suddenly she wanted answers. Suddenly the silence wasn't comfortable anymore. By the fourth day, I realized I wasn't just avoiding her. I was testing her. I was waiting to see how long it would take before she actually cared enough to look for me, not just text a question, not just throw a passive-aggressive comment into the void, but really look. But she didn't. There were no missed calls, no frantic voicemails, no banging on my friend's door, or even a knock at my office. Just one short message about the ring, then silence. What she didn't know was that I hadn't left town. I didn't run off to the mountains or vanish into some self-discovery retreat like the movies show. No, I stayed close. I watched her. I needed to see who she became when she thought I was gone. That Friday night, I parked across the street in a borrowed car and waited. Around 8 p.m., a sleek black sedan pulled up. She came out dressed in that crimson blazer she only wore when she wanted to impress someone important. She looked effortlessly perfect, but what gutted me was her expression. Light, carefree, like a teenager sneaking out, not a wife unsure where her husband had vanished to. A man stepped out of the car and opened the passenger door for her. Tall, sharp-suited, and way too comfortable. She laughed, loudly, and touched his arm like it was natural, like she'd done it before. My stomach twisted into something ugly, but I stayed still. They didn't go far, just to some trendy tapas bar we used to pass on our evening walks. I followed on foot, kept my distance, watched through the foggy window as they toasted glasses and leaned in like conspirators. At one point, she reached across the table and touched his wrist while throwing her head back in laughter. That exact movement. I knew it. It was her signature. The same gesture she used the first time she told me she loved me. At a Waffle House, no less. They stayed for over an hour. I stood across the street in the cold, unmoving, watching my marriage dissolve one sip at a time. I didn't rage. I didn't storm in. I just memorized every detail. The curve of her smile, the rhythm of her gestures, the exact second she stopped being someone who was mine. When they came out, she kissed him. Not on the lips, on the cheek. But it wasn't innocent. It was intimate in a way I hadn't felt from her in years. She lingered like she was holding on to a feeling. He placed his hand on the small of her back and walked her to the car. She didn't resist. She didn't look over her shoulder. She didn't even glance around to check if anyone might see. She thought I was gone. And that made her bold. But I wasn't gone. I was watching. And for the first time, I realized that maybe I'd been watching this entire marriage from the outside anyway. A spectator in my own life. The man in the background of her story. The fool clapping at jokes made at his own expense. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the car outside the same motel thinking, not about revenge, not even about betrayal, just about the truth. The small, undeniable truth that hurt more than anything. She had already moved on. The party joke was just the final confirmation. The next morning, I did something I hadn't done in a long time. I went back to our house. Not to walk in, not to talk, just to see it. To remind myself what it looked like when you gave everything you had to someone who didn't even bother to notice when you disappeared. The porch light was still flickering. I had offered to fix it 2 weeks ago, and she said, "Don't bother, it's not that serious." She never wanted my help anymore unless there was an audience to mock me in front of. I parked a few houses down and just sat there, gripping the steering wheel like I was preparing for a storm. My heart thudded in this slow, exhausted rhythm, the kind that doesn't panic anymore, just aches. I watched as she stepped out around 11 a.m., dressed in leggings and a loose hoodie, her hair tied back like she had nowhere important to be. She looked normal. Casual. Like a Saturday morning meant for errands or yoga. No sign of remorse, no signs of chaos, just her. Going about life like the bonnes who used to sleep beside her hadn't vanished without explanation. She pulled out of the driveway and didn't look back. Of course she didn't. Why would she? But I followed, quietly. I needed to know where her peace came from, because it certainly didn't come from me. First stop, a coffee shop. The same one we used to go to every Sunday before she started preferring her me time. I watched from the opposite end of the lot as she ordered, smiled at the barista, even took a selfie while waiting. That smile, it wasn't mine anymore. It hadn't been for a while. The way her eyes lit up for the camera, the effortless way she posed with her latte, it hit me harder than that kiss on the cheek ever did. Because this version of her, the one smiling at no one, for no one, was someone I didn't recognize. She wasn't broken, she wasn't worried, she wasn't searching the crowd for me. She was free. And somehow, that freedom was louder than every joke she ever cracked at my expense. She didn't go to meet anyone that day. She went home, stopped to pick up a few things from the store, even watered the plants on the porch before going back inside. She was alone, and still, she didn't reach out. Not once, not even a, "Hey, where are you really?" Not even a follow-up to the ring. That little circle of metal had probably been tossed into a drawer by now, buried under mail and meaningless things. That night, I wrote down every detail, every second I had watched, every feeling I'd buried, every time I had laughed off an insult, apologized for being boring, begged for intimacy like it was a privilege instead of a right. I wrote until my fingers cramped and my eyes blurred. I needed to see the truth on paper, because it was easier to confront when it wasn't trapped in my head. The truth was simple. She had already let go. Long before the party, long before the closet, long before the jokes started turning cruel. I had just been too desperate to keep the illusion alive to see the cracks forming. But not anymore. The next time I saw her, I wouldn't be watching. I'd be ready, not to fight for her, not to make her laugh again, but to say the one thing I never had the courage to say out loud. You don't get to smile at me like I'm still yours. I didn't expect her to show up at my office, not after a week of silence, not after she'd been perfectly content living like I was a ghost. But that Friday, just as I was closing my laptop and reaching for my coat, I saw her reflection in the glass of the door, hair pulled back, face tight with confusion, like she was rehearsing an apology she didn't fully believe in. I didn't say anything. I didn't even move. I just watched her from the inside as she hesitated outside, biting her lip like the victim in a scene she didn't know how to play. She knocked once, software hesitant. I opened the door halfway. Her voice was light, casual, like this wasn't the first time we'd seen each other in days. "You've been ignoring me," she said, eyes scanning the room behind me like she expected someone else to be there. "I left," I replied flatly. She blinked. "Yeah, I noticed. What's going on with you?" That question. What's going on with you? As if I were the unstable one, as if I'd just suddenly decided to turn this marriage into a cold war. I didn't answer. I just let the silence stretch until she filled it with nervous chatter. "Look," she said, stepping inside. "If this is about the party thing, I was just joking. You always used to laugh with me about that stuff." "I used to pretend to laugh," I said quietly. "You just never noticed." She looked stung, but only for a second. Then she folded her arms like she was preparing for a debate. "So now you're punishing me? Just vanishing like some emo teenager?" That sentence cracked something in me. After all the dismissiveness, all the jokes, now I was an emo teenager. I almost laughed, but I didn't. I just looked her straight in the eye and said, "You made me invisible long before I left." I just finally acted like it. She flinched. For a moment, I thought maybe that would be it, that she'd storm out, slam the door, and never look back. But she didn't. Instead, she did something I hadn't seen her do in years. She got quiet. She actually sat down, looked uncomfortable, and asked, "Did I really make you feel like that?" I should have felt something. Relief, maybe, or a sliver of hope. But all I felt was numb, because this wasn't an awakening. It wasn't regret. It was the first time she had to confront something without being able to laugh it away. "I gave you everything I had," I said. "You gave everyone else my dignity." She opened her mouth, closed it again, then finally said, "So what now?" "I don't know," I admitted. "But for once, I'm not rushing to fix it." She stood up slowly. "Are you staying somewhere safe?" I nodded. She looked at me for a long time, like she was trying to see a version of me she hadn't paid attention to in years. "You look different," she said finally. "Maybe I am." That night, I didn't cry. I didn't replay the conversation in my head on a loop like I used to when we'd argue, and I needed to figure out where I went wrong. I just lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, knowing for the first time that I hadn't. I hadn't gone wrong. I hadn't changed. I had just stopped shrinking, and as strange as it sounds, I slept better than I had in months. Because sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do isn't yelling or demanding or trying to win. Sometimes, it's just walking away, and meaning it. The following weekend, I received an invitation, Not a message, not a call, not even a knock on my door. An actual envelope. Cream-colored, thick, hand-delivered to the front desk of my temporary apartment. No return address, just my name written in the handwriting I knew too well. Inside was a simple card. Dinner, Saturday night, just us. No audience. And at the bottom, her name. I stared at it for a while, the words almost mocking. No audience. As if she understood now that the way she treated me only made sense when people were watching. As if one quiet dinner could undo years of turning me into a walking bit for her amusement. But something about it made me curious, because this wasn't her usual style. No texts, no control over how I'd react. Just a quiet request. I went. Not to fix things, not because I missed her, but because a part of me needed to see if she even knew what to do when she wasn't performing. She opened the door barefoot, wearing an old hoodie I hadn't seen in years. The one she used to wear on Sunday mornings when she still drank coffee in bed with me and watched dumb cooking shows. There was no makeup, no posing. Just her. The table was already set, no candles, no music, just pasta, 2 glasses of wine, and a silence that felt heavier than the walls around us. We sat down. For a long time, neither of us spoke. She was the first to break it. I rewatched the video from the party. I raised an eyebrow. Someone had posted a story, she added. I saw myself, heard the way I spoke. It didn't sound like a joke anymore. I didn't respond. I wanted her to sit in it. I sounded cruel, she whispered, like I forgot you were a person. Still, I said nothing. She pushed her plate away and looked at me, not for validation, but for something real. You never told me you were unhappy. No, I said, I didn't. I thought if I stayed silent long enough, maybe you'd notice on your own. And when I didn't, she asked. I realized I was training you how to treat me, I replied. Every time I laughed along, every time I stayed quiet, I told you it was okay to shrink me down in front of others. She wiped the corner of her eye and let out a shaky breath. I didn't want to lose you. That's when I leaned back and said something that had been boiling in my chest for months. You didn't lose me at the party. You lost me the moment you stopped protecting me when no one else was watching. Her face broke then, not dramatically, not with sobs or apologies, but like a mask cracking, slow and subtle. She had always been so polished, so rehearsed. But now, she looked human, vulnerable, and oddly, I didn't hate her for it. I didn't even feel bitter. I just felt tired. You were never the joke, she said quietly. No, I said, but you turned me into one anyway. We didn't talk about getting back together. We didn't talk about divorce. We just sat with the wreckage between us, finally acknowledging it was real. And maybe that's all we ever needed. Not more jokes, not more pretending, just the truth. And that night, when I left, she didn't try to stop me. She just stood there in the doorway, watching the version of me she'd never met finally walk away. The morning after that dinner, I took a long walk along the river trail behind my building. It used to be our place. We'd go there on slow Sundays, feeding ducks, pretending we were simpler people in a simpler marriage. But that morning, everything looked different, colder, sharper. I watched couples pass, hands held, heads leaning together, and I wondered how many of them were just pretending too. I wondered how many of them were one joke away from falling apart. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from her. Thank you for coming. I hope you know I meant what I said. I didn't reply. There was nothing more to say. And yet, she kept messaging. Not desperate, not angry. Just these strange little attempts to rebuild something she didn't even understand she had broken. A photo of the dog curled up with my old hoodie. A reminder about a dentist appointment I'd long canceled. Even a song, one we used to dance to in the kitchen before dinner, barefoot. I deleted each one as it came, not out of spite, out of mercy. For both of us. She didn't get it. She still thought this was repairable. That maybe enough dinners or memories or quiet texts could bring me back to that old version of myself, the one who smiled through the discomfort, laughed through the humiliation, stayed even when he felt completely unseen. But I had changed, slowly, silently. Not because I wanted to become someone else, but because I couldn't afford to keep being who I was with her. A few days later, I received a box. No note. Just a small cardboard box left outside my door. Inside was a bundle of items: an old hoodie of mine she used to steal, a photo strip from our second anniversary, the cracked mug I kept on my nightstand, and folded underneath it all, the book I gave her when she got promoted, Quiet, The Power of Introverts. I remember inscribing it with, "So you'll remember to hear the ones who don't shout." I stared at that inscription for a long time. It felt like a letter from my past self, sent forward into this moment just to hurt me, or maybe to free me. I didn't cry, I didn't even sigh. I just repacked the box and set it on my closet shelf, not to forget it, but to remember why I walked. Later that evening, I ran into her sister at a grocery store. She saw me, paused, then offered a sad little smile. "She's not doing great," she said. I nodded, but didn't ask for details. I didn't want them. "She keeps saying you left without a warning," she added, "that you just disappeared." I looked her in the eye and answered calmly, "I was disappearing for years." She just laughed through it. Her sister didn't know how to respond. She just gave a small, quiet nod, the way people do when they finally hear the truth but don't know what to do with it. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of black coffee, staring at the ceiling and thinking of every version of myself I had buried just to keep the peace. Every thought I swallowed, every insult I pretended was a joke, every time I stood beside her feeling like a stranger in my own life. And I realized the cruelest thing wasn't that she made me the joke, it was that she stopped seeing me as a person with a breaking point. She never thought I'd leave, because in her story, I was never the one who got to walk away. A month passed, then 2. The messages stopped. The box stayed unopened on my closet shelf. Life slowly resumed, though nothing about it felt familiar. And strangely, that was the best part. The version of me she used to define, awkward background noise, safe and invisible, that man no longer existed. I started doing things I hadn't done in years. Small things, but they felt revolutionary. I went to the movies alone without checking if she was free. I painted the walls in my new apartment deep blue, even though she always insisted light colors were less depressing. I cooked whatever I wanted, even if it meant burning half of it and eating on the couch. I stopped checking my phone during meals. I stopped apologizing for being quiet. One rainy afternoon, I found myself back at the river trail, the same one we used to walk. I sat on a bench near the water and noticed a couple nearby, laughing, sharing earbuds, holding hands like they didn't care who saw. I didn't feel bitterness. I didn't feel envy. I felt something gentler, a quiet kind of hope. That night, I opened the box, not to cry, not to reminisce, but to face it. One last time. I looked at the photo strip, our younger faces pressed together, eyes shining like we believed nothing could change us. I smiled at it, not sadly, but honestly, because that moment was real. We were happy once. We just didn't grow in the same direction. I folded the photo and placed it in my drawer, not to forget her, but to remind myself that even the things that fall apart can still matter. And then I did something that finally made it real. I wrote her a letter I never planned to send. A simple one, no blame, no begging. Just this: I hope you find someone who listens when you laugh, but hears you when you're silent. I wasn't perfect, but I was never a joke. I signed it, folded it, and placed it beneath the last item in the box, my wedding ring. Then I closed the lid, walked it to the curb, and let it go. That night, I slept without waking, because walking away hadn't just saved me from her. It finally introduced me to myself. Thank you for watching this story on the Reddit Confessions channel. If you've ever felt invisible in a relationship, or been treated like a supporting character in your own life, you're not alone. Now it's your turn. What's one historical event that changed how you see yourself or the world around you? Drop your answers in the comments below. Let's make this conversation bigger than just one story. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more real stories that matter.